Help Me to Help with Tamla Devon. This podcast is sponsored by Dr. Sheila Lewis and the Word Christian Fellowship of Long Beach. The Word Christian Fellowship is exercising social distancing in the midst of these unprecedented times. However, visitors can go to their website and click on Contact to provide their contact information or visit their Facebook page to receive timely, divinely inspired messages and or videos sent by Pastor Keith Jones on a weekly basis. These spirit-inspired messages by Pastor Keith Jones will address your spiritual needs and include subjects such as, where is God in the midst of chaos? Increase your capacity to walk in love. Let the peace of God reign in your heart, overcoming fiery trials, and pursue justice. Feel free to visit their website at twcflb.org or call them at 562-879-3973 or visit their Facebook page at the Word Christian Fellowship. Tamla, help me to help. Hey everyone, it's your girl Tamla Devon with Help Me to Help, and I am here with Lieutenant Eric Strong, and we're just going to drop some knowledge and share some information with you today that can help all of us in our communities to be stronger, healthier, and wiser, especially when it comes to our decisions that we make when it comes to dealing with law enforcement. And everyone knows that I'm a big health advocate, and I like to promote health, not only physical health, but mental health as well. And I think that this conversation with Lieutenant Strong will help us all to strengthen our physical and mental health, because we need to come to an understanding when it comes to law enforcement, especially how to deal with them in our communities and what's happening right now. And so with that being said, I'm going to let Lieutenant Strong go ahead and introduce himself. So Lieutenant Strong, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, Tam, and please call me Eric. I don't want to do this Lieutenant Strong thing.
Okay, I will call you Eric. So Eric, give us a little bit of your background and help us to understand who you are and why you and I are here today.
Well, I'm a man. I mean, I'm part of this thing we call the human race, and I think that's first and foremost. I grew up in the Los Angeles area. I've been here all my life. Attended schools, college. Young age of about 23 years old, I became a police officer. And I started off with Compton Police Department. And while I was there, I worked patrol, I worked SWAT, I worked gangs, I was on a task force. I pretty much had an opportunity to do a whole lot of things. And around 2000.
Let's back up. So you said that you were with the Compton Police Department. You went on to be a police officer at the age of 23?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Interesting thing enough is all through high school and initially in college, I wanted to be a lawyer. And somewhere along the line, that changed. I think it was when I had a little job it's kind of like a little intern at a law firm, and I realized that it wasn't for me. I wanted to stay in that legal field. I had some good influences. I mean, my father was a police officer, so it seemed like something that I would be interested in.
Okay. So while you were on the police department, the Compton Police Department, let's back up a little bit. You said that you worked in gangs?
Yes.
Well, how many years were you on that task force, or is it a task force?
It's not necessarily a task force. It was an assignment. I started off doing several stints there at what we call kind of on loan, when people were on vacation, and I would fill in behind them. And then I went into gangs. I probably worked there about a year and a half. The thing about working in Compton, I mean, just to be honest, is that, even on patrol, a lot of your daily contacts had to do with, gang members. It was in the early 90s. It was something that was relatively prevalent. And, I had gang members in my family. And I hate even saying gang members, they're people. They're people that are partaking in something that either, for whatever reason, they decided to go down that road. That's just where they are. So we had a gang unit, and I worked in that.
All right. And how long were you with the Compton Police Department?
Just a little under 8 years.
8 years.
About 7 and some change before they merged with the Sheriff's Department.
Okay. So that being that you worked in the city of Compton, I'm sure you saw or witnessed a lot or were a part of a lot of things that went down in the city.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah.
I good and bad, unfortunately, had to see a lot of things that were not so good, but the good part about that is the amount of experience,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of, I'd like to think of positive things that I was able to do, and the amount of help that you can give people. But yeah, working in a city that's small with a small agency, I worked PM shift, which was by far the busiest shift for most of those years, and unfortunately had to see a lot.
Yes, I'm sure you have. And, I'm a Compton girl, grew up in Compton. And so I saw a lot as well. I fortunately never was involved or witnessed any major gang activity, but I'm sure it existed. Now, so about how many years have you served in law enforcement?
This past April, May 27th.
Wow, 27 years. Kudos, good.
Yeah, getting close to the end.
Okay, well, it's always, it's wonderful to see men of color that have that type of longevity in law enforcement. And I think it's awesome. Okay. Now, recently I watched a video of a female police officer. I don't know what state it was in, but there was this little Black girl. She looked to be about 8 or 9 years old. And she was literally terrified of the police officer. The child began to shake and cry at the sight of this white female cop. And so I began to think of all the stress that child was experiencing at that moment, and how if she continued to have that fear, she's going to eventually develop high blood pressure and heart disease. And I wonder what made that child so fearful of the police officer. It was so much so that the police officer was literally in tears. She got down on her knees and got the child close to her just to have a discussion, just to let her know and to reassure the child, I'm not going to harm you, And so from your experience, what do you think of a situation like that? What causes a child to have such fear of law enforcement?
Tam, that is something that I think about quite often. First of all, a big contributor to that is the media. The media basically will show you over and over again all the negative contacts with law enforcement. They do not show the thousands and thousands of great contacts unless it's something like a Thanksgiving giveaway, or a Christmas Toys for Tots. Those things come about a couple times a year. The other thing is, and it's happened to me countless times, I can't remember, where I'm walking, in a neighborhood, or I'm in a shopping center or something, or just in a restaurant, and I'm in uniform, I'm working, and a parent brings a small child, 3 or 4 or 5, anyway up to 10 or 11 years old, and pushes them in front of, me or my partners or whoever it is, pushes them in front of me and says, they're going to get you if you don't act right. They're the ones that you're going to have to get. And, those kids back away and they're screaming, no, I don't want to go. And, sometimes I've seen parents go, dragging them. Come on, I'm going to give you to them if you don't act right. And that right there creates an anxiety in a child. And whenever I would see that, I would always kind of politely ask the parent, don't do that. And I would tell the kid, I said, hey, you know what? We're not going to get you. You're fine. We're here to help. If you ever need us, you know what? You can call on us. We do that to ourselves. We do that to our own children sometimes. I think that we think that we're using it as a scared straight type of tactic. But what we're really doing is we're creating, at least in my opinion, creating a very high anxiety for a child, when it comes to law enforcement. And if that child grows and does not get in one of those DARE programs, does not have exposure to a youth center, does not know about the Explorer programs, and the only thing that they see is something negative on the news, and they're afraid of us, that anxiety, that stress, that fear is going to just continue to multiply as they get older.
And so that even leads to, like I said, adult anxiety and hypertension. I mean, you think about people that say when they see a police officer in their rearview mirror, a car coming up behind them, they get scared straight. Even if they're not doing anything wrong, they start to release those stress endorphins, and so that can come from those childhood experiences, And so we have really got to work on ourselves and retrain ourselves on how we teach our children and what we teach our children about law enforcement so that they don't grow up to have that fear.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What would you say to the mother of a 7-year-old boy who's either trying to find a activity for him to do so that we've got to refocus our kids. We have got to get the video games out of their hands and we're becoming so antisocial. And I think that's too part of the problem when it comes to dealing with law enforcement. A lot of people just don't know how to react or how to handle themselves when it comes to law enforcement. So what advice would you give to a young mother?
The first thing I would think as a young mother, with me being very active, I kept my kids very active growing up, is get them involved in something, get them out of the house, get them exercising, get them into a place where they can be around other kids, and experience other activities. I mean, there's always the youth programs, the football, the basketball, the baseball, but there's other things out there. There's communities for just about everything. You can look on Facebook. There's communities for remote control cars, communities for drones, community for dirt bikes, go-karts, swimming, golf, whatever it is. I would just say exactly what you said. Get the game out of their hand for a couple hours a day, get them outside, and let them go and find something that they like. Youth centers, and I will speak to the one that I worked at for a long time. They offer programs. They offer karate. They offer boxing. They have reading programs. They have computer programs. They had a dance program. They have all kind of different things. I think they have a soccer club, skateboard park. I see a lot of times parents only exposing their kids to what they like, to what they're exposed to. For example, I played football. I like football. I'm going to put my kid in football. I've never been skiing, don't know how to ski. I'm not going to take my kid skiing. I've never been ice skating, don't know how to ice skate, therefore I'm not going to take them. I like bowling, I'm going to take my kid bowling. You know what I mean? So we always end up exposing our kids only to what we want to expose them. So I think the biggest thing is, find a kid's interest, find their passion, and then find a way to expose them. There's all type of programs all over, especially here in the LA area. And a lot of these programs you can find for free or at serious discounted rates. So I think, just getting them involved, doing something, get out there, get involved and get out of the house. Yeah,
it's good for their health. Definitely good for their health. So now we're coming up, and my parents always say, I don't mind is the devil workshop. So now you have your 12, 13-year-olds. And so now they're having that freedom where they can hang out with their friends at the corner or we're at the park or, just out and about. And I'm just going to give you a scenario. Say if it's about 5, 6 of them hanging out at the skate park, or just hanging out at the park in general. And law enforcement approaches them. How should those kids how should they have been taught to handle that situation? Whether say they're not doing anything wrong at all. How should they be taught to respond to that situation?
All right, so I just want to get this clear. They're at a skate park. It's an outdoor, obviously kind of an open one. And
yes.
The police pull up.
Somebody just happened to call the police and say, hey, there's a gang of black kids hanging out at the park.
Well, first of all,
a lot of times, especially more nowadays, we got the Karens, the Beckys that are.
So, it's one of those things where if you're not doing anything wrong, if you're behaving like you're supposed to be behaving, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, if you don't have anything you're not supposed to have, keep skating. Just keep doing what you're doing. I have stopped many times and got out of my car and walked up to a park where kids were playing football. I just wanted to go watch, or playing basketball. And the normal reaction is, uh-oh, cops are here, they all stop. Right. I just tell them, hey, keep going, keep doing. I just came to see, I just came to watch. I think number one, law enforcement needs to do more of that. Just get out the car and talk to people. But you asked, what do the parents tell their kids? How do we teach the youth how to handle that? We teach youth to continue doing what they're doing. We shouldn't be teaching our youth to run, from the police. We shouldn't be teaching our youth to be respectful, not only to the police, but to anybody. But I'm going to be honest with you. I can see why. I'm a black man. I have 2 black sons. I can see why people are afraid. I can see where the fear comes from. But it's going to have to be an effort on both sides to correct that fear, and that fear goes both ways. I mean, we could talk more about that. I just want to answer your question, but if they're at the skate park and they're not doing anything wrong, continue skating.
So, in other words, the best thing to do is not to run, because then it's going to be perceived that you were doing something wrong. Am I correct?
Well, there was a training that we used to go to that said a reasonable person doesn't run when they see the police. So therefore, if they run, that should be a red flag in the police officer's mind that something is wrong. Does that make sense? So,
but in the hood, people are teaching their kids different. Run.
Yeah, I get it. What you're really doing is you're giving them some type of red flag or reason, maybe perceived reason, to chase you or to feel threatened. It's one of those things where if you give somebody what they're already looking for, we kind of, if they're looking for a threat, if they're on high alert for whatever reason, which a lot of police officers are all the time. But when you see people start running, that's what you trigger in. That's what you key in on. And so why give them that? If you're not doing anything, stay where you are. Just continue doing what you're doing. I tell my sons, who are adults, and I say, I don't care if you have on your freshest pair of white Jordans and your brand new white jumpsuit, sweatsuit, favorite t-shirt, whatever it is. If they tell you get down in a pile of oil on the road, if they tell you to get down on the ground in a mud puddle, you get down. You don't ask why, you don't say for what, you do what they tell you to do. You take the threat away. I'm not saying it should be like this. I'm saying this is what I need you to do so that I can get you home. I said, and then you let me go deal with what they did and why they did it after the fact. Because if you're dead because you did something crazy or you felt like you were being mistreated and you said something, you know what I mean? What good does that do us? You know, why give them an opportunity, a fear, a threat that they can say they perceive as, you know, a deadly action against themselves or a violent action against themselves? Just do what they tell you to do. And I cannot emphasize enough, Tam, I don't think that that is right. I've been exposed to it. I've had to do it. It's happened to me. I don't think it's right, but it's the better option. It's the lesser of two evils in this world. And that's the unfortunate truth.
You said that this is the best scenario to just get down, do what they tell you to do. I'm going to, you know, I got to bring up George Floyd.
Okay.
Who was down.
Okay.
From the point of view that we got from the video, he was already subdued.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fear now. Okay, I've complied. I'm subdued. Why are they still on me? What?
Valid fear. That obviously, as we have seen, that incident, that video has rocked the world. Not even the nation, the entire world. There, like I said, I've been doing this 27 years. I've been highly trained, I've trained, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything like that. I'm just telling you that in my 27 years, I have been in a lot of situations. There's no justification I can find in that. There's no rational reason I can give that will explain any of that. You are absolutely right. We have that fear. Now the question is, what do we do about it? I will say this though, that George Floyd, and people may not like this, is not the norm. That was a heinous act that there is no excuse for. When you look at the amount of contacts that law enforcement has with people across the nation, and let's just go with the amount of contacts that law enforcement has even with the Black community. Not all of them, not even I wouldn't even say a smidget of a percentage of them in like that. That's why this was the catalyst that it was, you know, because it was so egregious. I don't know if there's an answer to that. I really don't. If my sons were to come to me and say, well, hey, Dad, but even if we do that, look, there's George Floyd. Why are you telling us to do this when this could be the outcome? I would still tell them, do not resist, do not fight, let them know that you're not a threat. I mean, do whatever you can. You know, obviously we cannot say in this world that there's any guarantees, but I would still say that that is the best course of action, to take away as much perceived threat and fear out of a police officer's mind is your safest bet.
Okay. Yeah, it's a tough subject right there. And I know that a lot of people are thinking that, okay, what if I do comply? Will I be the next, you know? So I've seen many videos and I see this fight or flight syndrome take place. And a lot of this when the police are trying to subdue a suspect or something like that, they're literally fighting against getting handcuffed. And you see 10 police officers piling on this one person trying to get them to get handcuffed. How do we retrain both the police and the community that fighting is not necessary? You know, I know that they have that fear for the suspect or the community or whoever it is that's being involved. But why does it also take so many officers to subdue one person?
Wow, that's a good one. You know, I was a force instructor for our department, so I taught these, some of these tactics, handcuffing techniques and all this kind of stuff. People that have never done it think that it's easy to handcuff somebody. Somebody that's fighting, somebody that's struggling, somebody that's pulling away. Sometimes the hardest person to handcuff is the smallest person, because sometimes they're just extremely wiry, or they're extremely flexible. It's not easy. Why does it take 10 officers? I won't say that it does take 10 officers. I would say that the premise and the idea behind it is that the more that we have, the faster we can get them handcuffed and be done with the situation and be safe. If I'm fighting and struggling with somebody by myself to get them handcuffed, that's going to be harder than if I have my partner. And if me and my partner are having a hard time, it's going to be even easier if we get a third or fourth person. Here's where the problem comes in. The problem comes in when you start getting too many people on there, and then they start getting in each other's way. They're kind of defeating against themselves. And I'm sorry, I'm just real. We've seen it on TV. Somebody's mad, somebody's angry, they get a kick in or a knee here, an elbow there. And all that does is start the fight all over again, because the person feels like they're about to be handcuffed. It's like, well, wait, what'd you hit me for? What'd you kick me for? It wasn't necessary. There's, I won't say that it takes 10. I won't say that it takes 5, but it could. When I was first coming on, there was this stuff out there in the world that we don't see that much of anymore, this stuff called PCP. And whereas, it's not as prevalent as it used to be, when you had to deal with somebody on PCP, there was a level of strength and a level of
superhuman strength. Definitely.
Yeah, superhuman. And I don't know if it was so much superhuman as the fact that they just didn't feel any pain whatsoever, which allowed them to keep pushing through anything that was happening to them. But yeah, it would take 4 or 5, 6 guys, to get that person handcuffed. But something my dad told me when I first joined the police department, like I said, he told me, I said he was a police officer. He said, Eric, when the handcuffs are on, the fight is over. Period. End of discussion. There are ways that we could do things a lot better. I'm going to go back also to the mindset of law enforcement. Law enforcement has to have a level of compassion, of human decency, of respect for a human being, to not want to hurt them. If they get hurt because there's a fight and there's a struggle, okay, but not to just kneel on somebody's neck while they're crying out, while everybody's telling you, as you said, they're subdued, they're on the ground. To me, I don't know. I don't know the police officer. I wasn't there. I wasn't in the situation. But I look at that and I saw absolutely no human decency at all. Just none. And so we have to do better on both sides. We have to do better with law enforcement feeling like the community is not them and law enforcement is us. And I think the community has to do better feeling like law enforcement is not them, and we're us. It's gonna take both parties to come together to make this, have any noticeable change.
Yeah, it does. It also takes retraining too, because I think that when it comes to the Black and brown community, I'm going to say Black in particular, I am told that sometimes officers of different races feel that we have a higher tolerance for pain or injury. And we all have one heart, we all have 2 lungs. Why is it that it appears, I'm saying appears, that more force is used or deadly force is used when it comes to people of color?
We'll go back to an answer I said earlier, the media. The media perpetuates that. The media continues to to push that storyline. And so you and I were both in the Los Angeles area. So you know where Santa Ana is, right? So last year, Santa Ana PD had an incident where they shot I believe, just based on the picture, she was a Caucasian, 17-year-old girl with mental problems. Now the girl had a BB gun, a pellet gun. Do you remember hearing about that?
Yes, it happened on the freeway, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you remember, you know that most of the people that I asked either never heard of it or don't remember it.
Wow.
How long did that story stay in the news?
Okay. 1 day.
1 day, okay. Another local agency, the Orange County agency, last year had a running gun battle. I mean, literally down several blocks, you know, traversing through a neighborhood in daylight.
I remember that.
Shot like 76 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
You heard about that one?
Yes.
You are a lot more informed than most people that I know. I've talked to many police officers that hadn't even heard about it. Where did that story go? How much did you hear about that? Maybe a day, if that. You know, so, you know, the media, they have scanners for every agency. You know, they don't pick and choose the agencies. And having been a watch commander and sitting in a chair where it's, you know, whatever they call a slow night, nothing's happened, almost nightly. If there's not something big that they're already on, the news is calling the station, hey, is there anything going on? Hey, can you tell me anything? They're hungry for stories. But also in that media, there's some editor, there's some producer, there's some lead guy on the news floor that's saying, yeah, kill that story, run with that, go do some follow-up here and there. Mm-hmm. So the question is, why does that happen whenever there's a African-American, a black, killed by a white police officer? Why doesn't it happen in these others? So if you're trying to cover the news and your whole purpose is talking about police shootings or police force, why are these other ones not being covered with such, you know, such vigor? The media knows that they're going to get a storyline. The media knows that they're gonna, you know, start protests, and there's gonna be something to follow this. Mm-hmm. So a lot of this, Tam, is what we used to call propaganda. You know, how do we fuel the Newsline? Okay. So, you know, to answer your question is, you know, I think a big portion of it is the media. And with social media now, with, you know, all of this is accessible at a moment's notice. You don't have to wait to get home to watch the 5 o'clock news. And if you miss that because you're running late, you don't wait till the 9 o'clock news. Everything is instant right now. It is instant. So I think that number one, that's one. To me, there's a lot of spokes in this wheel. And to me, that's a big one. You know, until we start looking and saying, you know, give us the facts. You know, the other question is, you mentioned something about some training or somebody being told that blacks don't have a higher tolerance of pain. Or
have a higher tolerance for pain.
That's absolutely absurd. I've never heard that.
It takes more to take a black person down than it does to take somebody else down. So
that's absurd.
A black person.
That's asinine that anybody would even say that. And if anybody said that to me,
do you think that there is a belief in that though?
What's that?
Believe that? Do you think that some officers believe that? That, you know, or do you think that they have a fear of us? I mean.
Oh yes, absolutely. Well, no. To the first part of your question, no, I've never heard that before in my entire career. Never. Mm-hmm. So to me, that sounds like somebody trying to justify whatever it is they're doing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it just sounds like pure ignorance for somebody to say that one particular race has a higher pain tolerance over another race. The second part of your question, is there a greater fear? Oh yeah, absolutely.
Why?
The media. And the media supports the training. So years ago, had some friends that live in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. and they were coming out to visit. And it was a friend of mine who had been here, and he wanted to bring his girlfriend out here. She was petrified to come to Los Angeles. Petrified. You know why?
Why?
She said, oh my gosh, never been out of New Orleans. She said, I'm either going to get killed by an earthquake, I'm going to get killed in a drive-by shooting, or there's somebody on the freeway shooting. Remember the freeway shootings were going on in the 90s?
Uh-huh.
That's the only news that she saw in New Orleans about Los Angeles. Other than maybe seeing the Grammys or something like that. That was her fear.
Okay.
That's all she heard in the news. So now let's take this and let's look at what movies do. Let's look at what television shows do. Let's look what the media perpetuates, you know, and if you're not a fan of a certain television program, are you going to get to see a Black family in a positive light? If you only watch certain programs, or if you only watch the news or the media and everything they show you is, you know, Blacks committing crimes. So I'll go back one more and you'll kind of get me on a tangent. Tell me if you need me to shut this one down. Because, you know, years ago, I remember years ago watching a news broadcast, and this was probably in the late 80s, early 90s. And the news broadcast was about a bank robbery that happened in downtown LA. This was well before the big Hollywood, you know, bank robbery shootout, right? North Hollywood. So they talked about male Blacks. 3 male Blacks robbed this bank downtown. Now, as we all know, and they showed, you know, surveillance photos of these 3 male Blacks robbing the bank. You know, and then I looked at some of the FBI statistics. And I want to say they said there were like 1,100 bank robberies a year. You know, the FBI covers bank robberies. And I said, okay, well, wait a minute. I don't know of a bank that doesn't have cameras. Do you? Even back then.
Right.
So if there's 1,100 bank robberies every year, then that means I should be seeing 3 news stories a day about a bank getting robbed.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
And I hate to say this, but probably then it wasn't known that Blacks robbed a lot of banks. So why are we seeing this particular bank robbery being highlighted?
Because it was Blacks committing it.
There were Blacks. So then you go to the other thing, and when you look at the media, typically when you look at the media interviewing somebody at a scene, who do you see them interview?
Oh.
When they go and talk to a Black person, we get I got bronchitis. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, they get us coming and going.
Right. But when you see them interview a white person or Asian person, or they're usually interviewing somebody that is a professional or somebody with some expertise. They'll go interview the firefighter that's on scene. They'll interview a doctor who said he was close by, and he, you know, hey, you're a doctor. Do you think that, you know, you said you're a doctor. Do you think that this person could survive these injuries? But when they go and find a Black person, the media find, and you're not going to tell me that there were no other representation of the Black race that you could have put on camera. Because as you know, the media is there. They don't just interview the 2 people you see. They interview probably 10 or 15 people, and then they pick the ones
that
they want to
use. They're going to use, right.
You know, so we're constantly fighting this battle of a negative image. The other thing is, if you look at the media, and there's studies that will show this. If you look at the media, when they talk about a Black suspect in any crime, they will typically say a very generic decision. A male Black wearing a blue shirt and dark colored pants. What does that tell you? Every male Black you see walking down the street with some kind of clothing on could be the suspect.
Right.
But if they want to describe a suspect of a white person, they will tell you approximately 5'10", light brown, blonde hair, wearing glasses, you know, blue eyes, you know, had a goatee, had a mustache. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, if you really look at it, you will see a white suspect that's been identified, and they give you a name. Mm-hmm. So they say, we are looking for this person right here. You see what I mean?
Right.
So this is not a mistake. This is not a mistake. When you put out a description and say that the guy that just robbed the little old lady, you know, is a male black wearing a blue shirt and dark pants, last seen in this area. You just said every male black in that area.
Right.
Now let's fast forward to law enforcement. For whatever reason, I don't know why, and I will just speak to, you know, certain departments. People that have never been in that community, especially the inner city, that's where they want to go work when they become cops.
Mm.
Now, they grew up in Orange County, they grew up in Santa Clarita, they grew up in the Valley, Thousand Oaks, wherever, you know what I mean? They grew up in the Inland Empire, have no connection to, let's say, Compton, right? But that's the station I want to go work. Why?
Right.
You cannot relate to anybody in that neighborhood. You don't look at anybody there and say, that could be my grandmother, my uncle, my mom, my dad, my parents' friend. You see them as a whole nother group of people. And I'm just telling you, this is my perception. And this, I'm not speaking for any agency. I'm not speaking for anybody else other than for Eric to say that I've been around this enough to see the mindset. If you don't care about the community you're policing, if you don't value the lives that you are coming in contact with every day, you will treat them poorly.
Right, you will treat them poorly. So how do we fix that? What's the cure for that?
There is no one cure. I believe that this is a multi-spoke wheel that's going to take a lot. I think it's going to take, one of the big things is recruitment, hiring. You know, one thing I'll tell you about the Compton Police Department, and people can say what they will about it. You know, people have had their bad things to say about it, but I will tell you this: most of the people that were there either grew up there or were connected to that city in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had a vested interest in that city. You know, whether it was their parents lived there, they grew up there. Now, that doesn't mean that they always did everything right and perfect. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there was a vested interest. We need to get people from the community. And in my opinion, no matter what chief, sheriff gets up there and says, we're going to start hiring more minorities. Okay, they say that. They go out and they recruit. But do they actually really hire them? You know, it's one thing to say, oh, my numbers increased. I hired 5 more minorities this year than I did last year. You know, but where did you really get them from? You know, there are so many hurdles and obstacles for Blacks to get over just to get hired. They make it so much harder. You know, I was talking to a young man the other day, and he was talking about, you know, having his bachelor's degree and going through the academy where virtually all the Blacks, I think he said all of the Blacks that were in his academy class, all had degrees, all had good credit, you know, and so forth. However, you look at the whites and they all have high school diplomas. 1 or 2 may had a DUI, you know what I mean? Yet they can get hired, but our children get disqualified. And I say our children because my son was disqualified from the agency that I work at. This kid has never been in trouble, he's been laid off from a job. He worked at Amazon, and they did majorly, they pull in 100 people and they lay off, you know, 60 or 70 at a time. Never been in trouble. And he got disqualified. And the reason they said he got disqualified was because in 2018 in September, when he was 21 years old, they asked him, had he been around a place where drugs were being used? And he said, yes, he was at a party and some of his friends were smoking marijuana. Now, this was in the polygraph, Tim. This was in a polygraph. So he's being honest. The next question was, did you use? No, I did not. And he passed that on the polygraph. However, a background investigator disqualified him, saying, well, he should have used better judgment. He should have left the party.
Oh, wow.
Now Now, here's something that I said this was September 2018. Why? You have a 21-year-old young man at a party where they're smoking marijuana. September of 2018, marijuana was legal.
Mm-hmm.
Why does he need to leave?
Right.
Why should he leave? So basically what you're telling me is that any place if I'm at the park, if I'm at the movie theater, if I'm at a concert, I smell marijuana, I got to get up and go. Or else I'm being irresponsible. They will find ways to disqualify us. And I'm pointing that out because it's a very little thing. My cousin works for the department. Her son, at 19 years old, applied for, and let me back up. These are not deputy sheriff positions. These are developmental positions like a security officer.
Oh, wow.
Like a custody assistant. My son was applying to be a security officer and a custody assistant. I'm not saying give the kid a gun and a badge at 21 with no life experience, but right. Why can't he get within the job and the system to start, cousin, son was, grew up out in Inland Empire, one of those places where not many blacks were around, and felt like he was being mistreated at his job working at a video store. His mother said, if you don't think they're treating you fairly, don't go back. That's not how I raised you. So he quit. I verified because I did not believe it. I did not believe that this kid was disqualified at 19 years old for a developmental position because he did not give a 2-week notice at his last job.
Wow.
And I had some people look into it. So they will find ways to disqualify us, but yet and still, if you go look in the background of some of these other applicants, it's far worse. So recruitment is big. The other thing is that we have to get the community wanting to be on the department. You have to be the change that you want to see. Right now, everybody's calling for them to change. But why don't you get in? Go in there, force their hand, say, look, why is it that 1,000 African Americans can apply, but 2 get hired, but 1,000 of any other race can apply and 100 get hired?
Right.
Well, tell me, explain this to me, because the degrees
How do you fix that with recruitment and background investigators? How do you fix that?
You fix it by putting the right people in the right positions. You fix it by putting people in there that are not going to just give lip service. And, those people that are in there also have to hold accountable the people that they're tasked with doing a job. So, in other words, if we have background investigators, let's just use a big department like LAPD or the Sheriff Department, they probably get thousands and thousands of applicants. It's not one background investigator, there has to be a checks and balance. There has to be a checks and balance that says, why did you disqualify this person, but you didn't disqualify that person?
Right.
And as long as you have these panels, and people say, oh, well, we have a background, a hiring process panel to make sure that the background investigators are doing it right. Mm-hmm. But who's on the panel?
Right.
You know what I mean? So, there's so much subjectivity. It's not objective anymore. It's not the best candidate. It's who we choose and who we don't choose. Sometimes it's as simple as we need more women. So they just go out and hire a bunch of women. We need more Asians. So we go out and we need more blacks. So we go out and hire more. But then once we check that box off and we got that little, our little political checkbox, we're done. But the community has to be involved and want to be the change that they want to see. Training is the other big thing. We have to do much more training. When I go to training on diversity, when I go to training on tolerance, and I went to a conference last year and they had a breakout session about tolerance and the injustices of mankind. What do you think the first thing they talk about is?
What?
The Holocaust. All of our cultural diversity and tolerance training is based on the Museum of Tolerance. And I'm not saying it's bad. It's a wonderful experience. I've been several times. But why is America going outside to something that happened in another country, as horrific as it was? I'm not making light of it. But this country has not recognized and acknowledged and admitted its own evils.
Right. And that's, to me, one of the major problems there, when you can't see the harm, the pain and the suffering that you've inflicted on your own people, but yet you choose someone else to focus on. And so it does. I think that a lot of people are desensitized to the African American struggle and what has happened throughout history. And so a lot of people don't believe that systemic racism exists. A lot of people didn't believe that racism exists, except now for social media showing these incidents that are occurring. And I'm not talking about just in law enforcement. I'm talking about all over the nation in general. People are starting to witness occurrences of racism. And so we got to start literally from the bottom up. When I see, and you can tell me if I'm wrong for feeling this way, but when I see 27 police officers quit or take their early retirement because of the protest that's going on right now, I almost feel like, we're cleaning out the bad and making room for the new. That old way of thinking is being weeded out. And you don't have to agree with me, but I see that. If you don't want to recognize that was wrong and what happened, and just say, okay, let's retrain. Let's start looking at people differently. If you don't want to do that, then to me, you're part of the problem.
I agree. I don't disagree with you. I don't know if you're talking about the police officers in Buffalo, New York, where 57 of them resigned from their ERT team because the guys that pushed the old man down on video. I would challenge any one of those guys that resigned, any one of them, without a doubt, that if that had happened to their grandfather or their father, and they saw that police officer do that, and they had a personal connection to that, would they feel the same way? I'm willing to bet, and I would put money on it, that they would be down at whatever agency, whatever department that occurred in, and they'd be looking for that officer wanting to fight and say, why did you do that? You didn't need to do that. There's so many different ways to handle so many situations. And again, I can't say it enough. I wasn't there.
Right.
But you look at it. On the video from behind, this guy looked elderly. You know what I mean? What was, and let me back up and say this. That officer that pushed him, I have no doubt in my mind that he was not thinking, I'm telling you this, he was not thinking, I'm gonna push this old man down and I'm gonna knock him on his butt and he's gonna fall and crack his head and do that. That was not his intent. I wouldn't say that was anybody's intent. But when you've been in this profession long enough, you should know how to handle various situations in different ways. I'm not going to handle a 75 or whatever, however old man he is, that is not doing anything, the same way that I'm going to handle somebody that just came out of a store with a gun in his hand, robbing and shooting. You just don't, there's this thing called discretion. There's this thing that, what would have been wrong with just walking towards that man and letting him back up on his own? I don't think that officer intended to cause that injury. I don't think he could have ever even foresaw that was what, was going to happen. But the bottom line is, the way he handled it, it could have been handled better. The outcome was very bad. For his partners to look at that and say they resign, they're giving the wrong message. I really believe they're giving the wrong message and they're supporting the wrong thing.
Because we're going to do a part 2 to this, because I really think that this subject matter is very important. And we're going to even go even further into the Police Against Racism. And I know that you are a board member of this body. So tell me a little bit about Police Against Racism.
You want me to tell you a little bit about it, you said?
Yes, tell me.
So, Police Against Racism is a new organization. I mean, it is not something that has been around for very long at all. But what it is a group of police officers, community members, retired police officers, that just as the world has seen this catalyst incident with Mr. Floyd, so have we. And we're here. We want to develop a way to help combat this systemic racism. You know, and as you said earlier, it's not just in law enforcement. It's systemic in a lot of different. It's systemic in the court system. You know, it's systemic in the DA's office. You know, so we're looking to be a voice, and be a very loud voice, and be a very loud and powerful voice against racist acts, not only outside with the community, but also within the departments. One of the big things that we are looking to do is a training component. A big thing that we're looking to do is getting in there and helping and being involved with recruitment, which we just talked about. You know, so we want to be multifaceted. We want to offer some protections so that police officers and people within law enforcement all over the world that are being racially discriminated against internally, that are being you know, basically stymied and quieted. We want to be their voice for them and give them some protection. We also want to be the voice of reason that can come to the community and say, hey, you realize you have a large group of law enforcement here that supports you, the community. We agree with you. At the same time, we hope that the community will listen to us, because not all incidents are necessarily race biased, race related. Just because there are two different people of two different races, one with a badge, one without, that does not necessarily mean it is a racially motivated incident. And so we hope to become that voice of reason that can, you know, get out there and really just, you know, push certain laws, you know, legislature. You know, we want to get behind some of the legislature that we know and we see will hopefully help it, whether it's additional training, whether it's getting rid of certain policies, getting rid of certain procedures. You know, I think it fares well that you have law enforcement standing up and against law enforcement when there are some of these things that, like I said, that are racially motivated.
Okay. Well, yes, we definitely look forward to learning more about Police Against Racism and excited for what this will help with in our communities. And so we want to just encourage people to, as Jesse Jackson used to say, keep hope alive, because we can make some changes. We can see some things change, and this is not the end, and this is not it for us. And we just gotta stay positive. We gotta keep our energy positive. We gotta keep our thoughts positive, because having that negative mindset can lead to different health issues. And again, this is one of the reasons why I had you come on, because we want to help our communities to change their mindset, especially when it comes to law enforcement. There are some law enforcement officers that are out there, and they're hoping and wishing for the best, and they're in the community to serve the community and to protect the community. And so I definitely thank you for your time today. And I'm looking forward to our part 2, and we're really gonna dive into the Police Against Racism. And actually what I'm gonna do with this podcast is I'm gonna give people the opportunity to send us some questions, and then we can address their questions in our next podcast. How's that sound?
Oh, that sounds awesome, Tam.
Yeah, we'll get some questions. We'll address them in our next podcast.
I'm excited to be put on the spot, and I just want to say thank you for this opportunity too.
I'll put my email up at the end of this podcast where you can send those questions to. And definitely, Eric, we thank you for your time. We thank you for just being one of those good boys out there.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you again, and thank you for your time.